So industry insider Tom Henderson, who is correct about such leaks as the PlayStation Project Q, PlayStation DualSense Edge, among other things, he's saying that Sony is planning a PlayStation 5 Pro, and it's going to be coming out in November 2024. Now, to that I say, Sony, I think we need to pump the brakes a little bit and have a chat. I don't think you're considering all the factors at play here. I think right now, maybe they're thinking of it as the PlayStation coming up to its third year anniversary. And so it's growing to a point where a mid-generation refresh makes sense. But Sony, it might be turning 3, but it's more like it's 1.5. Because maybe they forget, but I don't forget. We had the pandemic where we had supply chain issues that completely hampered the PS5 sales. For the longest time, I think anybody who wanted a PS5 knows this, it was really hard to get your hands on one. Ridiculously hard. Here in Japan, for me, I couldn't get my hands on a PS5 until like 4 or 5 months ago. I had to go into a lottery, and it was like going to the DMV, but they never call your number. Like, it just would never seem to happen. Finally, I can buy one at I can buy one, anyone can buy one at their leisure now. So a lot of PlayStation 5 gamers, they arrived at the party a long time ago, but the club wasn't open. So I'm not blaming Sony about that. That was out of their control. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of people are just now getting their hands on a base PS5. And for a lot of those consumers, they're going to look at a PS5 Pro and say, I just bought this thing. I just got here. What are you doing? You got to consider all the factors. It can't just be as simple as it's a 4-year-old device when the PS5 Pro comes out. You have to consider every factor here. So let's consider another one. Let's talk about games, right? Because if you're going to make a more powerful version of the system, my assumption is going to be that we are now receiving games that are going to require it. Like if gamers want to get the best version of this game, it makes sense to make a more powerful version of the console. And to be sure, we have our games that you can't run at 4K, ray tracing, 60 FPS. I get that. But I don't understand why we need this when in my opinion, I don't think we've had any games that have really pushed the PS5, the base PS5 to its limits. I don't think we've run into any games that you played that thing and you go, this thing could use a little bit more power though, a little more juice. We see this all the time for the Nintendo Switch, right? All the time. I'm not blaming Nintendo for not putting out a Nintendo Switch Pro. They didn't do it because the pandemic hit. The supply chain would have been a disaster for them to try to put out a new system. And the Switch was selling like hotcakes anyways with things like Animal Crossing, New Horizons, and Ring Fit Adventure and such. It made no sense for them to do it. They, according to a lot of insiders, they were planning it up until the pandemic, and then they just said, nah, we're selling like hotcakes. Doesn't make any sense anymore. Shut it off. So it makes sense. Even if you play Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom right now, even I admit, and I really love that game, even I would admit, yeah, it could use a little more horsepower behind it. I think a lot of people would play a lot of bigger Nintendo Switch games and say, yeah, a little extra horsepower under the hood would have done this game a little bit better, right? But name me a PS5 game where you've really felt that way. The game's really been hampered in some meaningful way, other than a few frame drops here and there. I'm talking rare ones. Like, I remember some people were getting angry about Final Fantasy 16 saying there's frame drops. I played that thing for hours, and I'm like, what are you talking about? What, did you see like a little bump to 55 now and again? I think some people are a little bit ridiculous when it comes to frame rate, but that's neither here nor there. I mean, look at the list of PS5 exclusives. Go to Wikipedia and look at the list of PS5 exclusives. You'll find there's 11 games there. I believe 5 of which haven't even come out yet. 2 of which are PSVR 2 games. And 1 of which is Destruction All-Stars. And I'm not talking about that game. It sucks. So we barely have any games that you can only play on PS5. Like, it doesn't have a PS4 version and a PS5 version like God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West. You can only play it on PS5. We barely have any of those. And you're already going to tell me, but we need to push it further. I don't see it. So I'm very confused by this. To be honest, Sony's been confuddling me for a bit. I've been befuddled by Sony's decisions when it comes to the hardware side of things. I can't figure out where their head is. You've got the Project Q, a remote play device, apparently won't do cloud streaming. It isn't a traditional handheld. It's literally the equivalent of clipping your phone to your DualSense controller and using remote play. What's going on there? PSVR 2. PS5 is barely out for like any period of time. You're already putting out a successor to the PlayStation VR. It isn't even backwards compatible with the previous games from your previous iteration of the system. Costs more than the price of the console itself. Can't use it on PC. Sold about half of what Sony was projecting it would sell. I could have told him that. Could have saved him a bunch of money. I think anyone could have told him it wasn't going to sell as much as they thought it was going to sell. And now you got this, a more powerful version of the PS5 when we're barely pushing it with power, and most people are just getting their hands on a base PS5. So yeah, if you couldn't have figured it out by now, I don't think this is a good idea. I think it's a bit of a misstep. I think it's a waste of resources. I don't think it'll sell well enough for Sony to bother doing it. I think it'll just sow ill will with consumers that bought a PS5, and it feels like they just got it a year ago, because a lot of them will have just gotten it a year ago, myself included. So just let me know in the comments. Do you think a PS5 Pro is a good idea November next year? Do you think it's perfectly fine to be doing that? Because maybe I'm overreacting, and maybe you do play PS5 games and you feel, this could use a little bit more of a punch to it. Or, I think most people have enough. I think the PS5 has been in enough people's hands that they're going to feel like it's long in the tooth. Let me know in the comments. So, subscribe if you enjoyed the video. This is Unending Quandary saying thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you again real soon.